Hello everyone, this is the RHB and I am back after a little absence. Got a lot going on. I had to start back to school and doing my lesson plans and all that good stuff. But I'm back to do my next video, the best SIDS of Final Fantasy. So we're going to start with, technically Final Fantasy 1 doesn't have a SID. I guess in one of the later ones, one of the remasters, they refer to him as the guy that created the original airship. But since there's no real mention of Sid in the original game, he's excluded from this list. So we're going to start off number 12. The worst Sid in Final Fantasy, to me, was Sid from Final Fantasy 6. He looks like he's walking around in looks like a banana in like skin tights, rain yellow poncho. He watched the Celes for a year. Just kind of creepy. I know he's a scientist for the Magitech and he's a good guy, but doesn't really do anything for. He's just part of a smaller story. So he was at the bottom of the list. Right above him at number 11 was Sid from Final Fantasy V, and the reason I can't stand he's depressed. He needs help from his grandson Mid, who I thought overshadows Sid. So he ranks pretty low there. The next one on the list is Sid from Final Fantasy II. He gives you an airship as he dies, and that's it. It's an important part of the story. It's an important thing that he does, but it doesn't really add anything to the story. It's just another thing you get. And again, Bart and Final Fantasy II, a lot of things were just kind of glossed over. Number 9 on the list is Sid from Final Fantasy III. I know he plays a little more important role. He puts the drill on the airship, which is pretty cool. And he has a part of the story, but it happens so early, it's easy to forget. And I know he's one of these characters that one of the 4 things that you get near the end when you go to the Cloud of Darkness. Again, it's not very memorable, and I'm having a hard time remembering it. Since it's not very memorable, he ranks pretty low. The next one is, on number 8 on the list, is Sid from Final Fantasy VIII. He's the headmaster of Balamb Garden, but he's very stoic, and he doesn't really help much, except that he keeps his wife alive. I know he's kind of in between. It's kind of a political version of Sid, where he's got to appease Norg, the Garden Master, and he tries to keep his wife alive. It's very convoluted. I don't think he's around a lot, and he's part of the story. He's an essential part of the story, but he doesn't do a lot. He doesn't really step up and do anything that's very, very memorable. I just remember him being pulled in a lot of different directions. And next on my list, number 7, is Cid Raines from Final Fantasy XIII. You battle him, and it seems like he's gonna be a villain, but he's not. I mean, at the end, he's a good guy. His focus is to kind of prepare your party for their next part of their focus. So so he ranks pretty high. Again, it's rare that you get to fight a Cid in the Final Fantasy series. I know it's been done before with Final Fantasy XII, but Cid Raines was there. He ranks right in the middle. Again, he was a good Cid, but he was in it for such a little bit of time that when he was there, it was impactful and it was meaningful. But he needed to be in there a little bit longer, in my opinion. Number 6 on the list is Cid from Final Fantasy X, and he's the leader of the Al Bhed. He has the airship, and he's crucial in the fight against Sin. So that's why he got some pretty high praises. He is a major part of the story. He's a little whiny, and then the follow-up, I know I shouldn't take into account, but the follow-up of the way he is in Final Fantasy X-2 really put a hinder. He should have been a couple. I think I had him a couple spots higher, but then I just couldn't get that nasty taste out of my mouth of what he was like when in Final Fantasy X-2. So he lost a couple points there. But again, one of the more animated Cids, one of the more crazy ones, I guess. So again, he ranks up there pretty high. He's important, as all Cids in Final Fantasy are important. Number 5 on my list is Cid from Final Fantasy IX. He helps the party, and he leads the charge against the dragons when you're going into the little ball from Memoria. He goes to the other world, and when he's the frog, he represents. He gets you out of the desert palace that Kuja has you locked in. And it was kind of cool to see a Cid that had like a checkered past. He was an adulterer. And that was pretty cool. Again, he was such an important part of the story, and he was throughout a lot of the game. So that's why he ranked up there pretty high. So Cid from Final Fantasy IX ranks in at number 5. Number 4 is Cid from Final Fantasy 15. He's a mechanic. He helps with your weapons, and he has the boat that takes you to Altissia. He's a grizzly old guy, and you always have to go back to him. It's kind of like a home base, and it just reminded me. I just felt more connected to that character again with Sydney, his granddaughter, being there, and Sid has the connection to your dad. It felt like he was a little bit more vital part. He's kind of like that, that old grandpa or that old uncle that just is always in your life and always just trying to look out for you. So Sid from Final Fantasy 15 was number 4. Top 3, number 3, Sid from Final Fantasy 4, and he was awesome because he was part of the story. He's the first Sid to join your party. He jumps from an airship holding a bomb, and he still survives. He's Rose's father, so he ranks up there high. He was important. Again, he's a little bit crazy, and it's easy. You get him, he goes away, and then he goes away for a good part of the game. If he had been there a little bit more, he might have slipped into that number 2 spot. Number 2 spot is Sid from Final Fantasy 12, and I know a lot of people dislike him. He is a true villain, and he wants to be a god. He learned how to summon an Esper from manufactured Nethicite. He ranks up there high because it was a different way to go with a Sid, to have him be a villain, and you fight him a couple times, and he's pretty tough, and he's got the tie into Balthier, so he ranks up there pretty high. And honorable mention, Alcid from the Rosarian Empire. He would have been pretty low on the list. I mean, he shows up a few times. It was cool, but he's not a true Sid. Dr. Sid was more of a Sid Final Fantasy character. He was more important to the story. And number 1 on my list is Sid from Final Fantasy 7. He's one of the main characters, and he is a true fighter. He is a flyer. He has a plane, a rocket, an airship. He lights dynamite with a cigarette in his mouth for one of his limit breaks, which is pretty cool. And at one point he becomes the leader of your party when Cloud's incapacitated. So Sid from Final Fantasy 7 is the best Sid of all of them. He's the most important. Without him, you can't have the story. And I know you could say that about any of the Sids, but that Sid was so crucial to the story. Oh, that's my list for today. Next time I come with a list, I'm going to have the 10 worst characters of Final Fantasy, the main characters from the main story.